So let's start with introductions. I'll go first. So I'm Ivanka. I'm a high school student who's really passionate about climate change and sustainability. So I first got interested in this space when I did my first research project at the University of Minnesota. And I did it under reducing feed additives or reducing methane emissions from livestock using feed additives. So yeah, and then I started this initiative, MethaneMatters, to educate people on methane emissions and how to mitigate them and why they're so important. And I also wrote this book that goes into much more detail than any of my videos on this channel. And yeah, I'm really excited to hear about your work in technology.
That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Do you want to introduce yourself now?
Sure. I'm Upinder Kaur. I'm an assistant professor in the Agricultural and Biological Engineering department here at Purdue. My PhD was in robotics. I am a roboticist. I build robots and cyber-physical systems. So cyber-physical systems are basically a network of agents where you're tying together sensing, actuation, communication, and intelligent decision making. So these could be as big as like a smart city, or it can be something like just a bunch of appliances in your house that are interconnected. And the reason that I work with this is because for having systems that operate in real world, you need them to have a cohesive networking and communication profile so that they can work together. So in my case, the edge devices are usually robots, and they're both the sensor and the actuator with layers of communication and decision making inbuilt.
Okay. So can you share a little bit about some projects you've done or projects you're working on right now?
Sure. So we are in my lab at Purdue. We are primarily focusing on applications in agriculture with robots. So, one of the robots that is very much relevant to this podcast is the methane robot. This is a in vivo robot in the sense that it goes inside the stomach of a cow. It's very much like those implantable devices that you find for endoscopy in humans,
Okay.
but it's a little bit different because in the human because the volume of the internal organs is so small, the peristalsis of which is the rhythmic contractions of our inner gastrointestinal pipeline, they move forward with that. But in a cow, the stomach of a cow is about 80 to 100 liters, and it's a very stratified environment in the sense that you have gases on top, then you have fresh hay matter, which is more solid like in the middle. And then as you keep going down, there is clearer and clearer fluid. So this robot essentially floats through these layers to capture data about how much methane is coming out or how much methane is being generated. And then also biomarker activity like temperature and pH, so that animal scientists and nutritionists can make better decisions about countering the methane production as well as understanding the health of the animal. And to put this in perspective, before this robot, the other technologies that are available are mostly mask-like agents, mask-like devices, um, which are called sniffers. So they basically sample the air the animal exhales to account for how much methane is coming up. But there is an inherent problem with them because for the device to work, you have to put the cow in a specific position, in a stall, tied together, right? So you don't really get a lot of information of how much does activity change methane generation. And how much does water intake and so on, all these factors impact methane output. So from our preliminary studies, which we have recently published, we have found that those things make a lot of impact. In fact, if a cow is being fed a diet and it's eating, let's say, in 3 chunks throughout the day, 3 major chunks, and the other cow tries to eat more continuously, there is a very big difference between the peak and the overall methane that comes out. All of this is missed by current methods, and the current methods are also limited by scale, because you can imagine it takes a lot of effort to handle the animal, to bring it to this specific device, collect data for 20 minutes at one go, and then put them back, and so on. So you cannot really get a lot of data at scale. And these devices are also expensive, so somewhere around $100,000 to $150,000 each device, just the initial cost and then upkeep. Whereas our robots can be scaled down to just under 1,000 maximum, with all things included.
Okay, so do these robots stay in the cows like the whole time?
That's our plan. So this is a developing technology. So we are trying to aim for 5 years so that it can stay in the productive cycle of the cow once it's beyond the calves stage. And we are trying to make it more power harvesting, so you don't have to worry about batteries. And it can operate at the frequency that the person desires, like the farmer or the animal scientist who's working with them.
Okay, so it's kind of like a bolus.
Yes, it has more functionality than a bolus because it can change through the layers, right? But the simpler version would be, if we take out the movement out of it, would be to just make it more stable at the gas layer or at the middle of the liquid layer, so you can get more accurate biomarker data.
Okay, that's really cool. So how did you get into like all this stuff that you're doing? I'm curious.
Actually, I come from the automotive world, so my bachelor's is in mechanical engineering, and I did a master's back in India in robotics and automation. And after that, I was working at General Motors for a bit, and then I decided to pursue a PhD. So I came to the US, and here this was my main project. It was started by my advisor, and when we started, there was no such thing as like robotics for animal ag, or especially for this application particularly. This was back in 2019. So it took me a few years to just collect the data, build data sets, formulate the communication protocols, the networking protocols, and to figure out how such a thing would even operate. So on the way to this robot, we have also built sensors and edge devices that can be mounted on a cannula, which is a hole that's created surgically on the side of the cow to get access to the rumen. These are standard practices in animal science. And what they usually do is they just take a cup, put their hand in through the cannula, take a sample. Right?
Yeah, I've worked with that.
Yeah. So as you can imagine, that that's not very real time and does not give you a lot of information, and also introduces oxygen in an anaerobic environment, altering its natural function. So over the years, we have matured from this in vivo device and the edge-based device to now a full robot, and have released a bunch of data sets, papers around it, and I'm hoping that the robot paper will be out soon. But yeah, that's been the kind of like the journey for it.
That's nice. So can you tell me about some more like technologies that you're using to collect the data?
Sure. So we have in my lab a bunch of robot dogs. So the robot dogs actually can carry a multitude of sensors, right? So they can carry a methane sensor, which is laser based. They can carry other environmental sensors. So we have done some studies initially to actually monitor behavior and methane output from those. The other side of work in my lab is about managing interaction with animals um, and robots. Right. So there is a huge field in robotics, human robot interaction. But the main premise there is that we are we as roboticists are also humans, and we understand how other humans will react. Right. There is language that is common. So even if I'm collecting data, I can understand what this person was trying to do and then code my robot to acknowledge that, right? So there is an inherent understanding of behavior in the human robot space. But that's not the case with animals because we don't know what their cues mean. And there is also independent or individual level variability among animals. And I would say that the way animals think is a little bit different than humans. They have associative thinking,
Hmm.
where they tend to associate situations or locations to um, memory in a very stricter way. For example, if you mistreat um, like a horse or a cow in a room, that horse or a cow will be very afraid of going into another room thereon, right? Which is
Okay.
not the case with human beings.
Hmm.
So this is why the structures of barns and even the handling facilities are made in a very specific manner to take care of like shadows and stuff like that. So how do you get a robot to learn those associative behaviors so that it can also communicate with animals, get bidirectional interaction? So my inspiration for this work has been kind of like the actual shepherd dogs, where they can herd entire flocks of sheep and other livestock. And to the best of our knowledge, we don't think there is a common language there. So how are they doing it? So um, I think it's a mix of um, what I call short-term cues, which is vocalizations, short-term gestures, and long-term behavior, which is mostly like motion of how they are approaching, what kind of trajectory they're planning around those animals. And we are trying to build this understanding into robots so they can also do the same thing. This is primarily targeted towards animal agriculture because that's one area where you don't have an abundance of labor otherwise. There is a big chasm of people needed and especially skilled expertise that is needed in this area, which is lacking. And I think it can build in a much more reliable source of automation for farmers, especially in the US, where the average age of farmers is now around 56 years old. So they need this kind of automation to actually help sustain these farms long term.
Okay. So other than methane, what other data do you collect from cows? Because I know you focus on the like health and well-being of cattle too.
So we collect temperature data and pH. We would also like to collect VFA data, which is volatile fatty acids. So those are kind of like a precursor to the protein that's generated and some important marker in the digestion process that animal scientists want to know. So, but there's no sensor that is available, at least to me, that I can put on my robot. But if anybody who listens to your podcast has one, please feel free to reach out to me.
Okay. Yeah. Do you collect data like physical activity or rumination or anything?
Yes. So we have a collar that can be used to collect activity data globally, but our in vivo sensors that we have released earlier also have an IMU, so that can collect activity data. This has also informed the energy generation part,
Hmm.
because we are going to use partially kinetic energy generation for fueling our robots through motion that is inherent from the animal.
Okay. Yeah, actually, my dad has a company called Everest.ai where he works with collars and stuff like that too for
It's cool.
cattle. Yeah. Okay. So what does your lab look like? Like, what's your team composition?
Mine is a new lab. I am I guess, a relatively new assistant professor. I started in 2023. So I have three master students and one PhD student, and a postdoc just completed his tenure this year. And we have people from, I think, a lot of countries now. So I also have about 5 undergrads, mostly from Purdue, who are actively involved in the research side as well. The team composition um, is as varied, and I always welcome people who are underrepresented in robotics to join us. It's a fairly open policy that if you are interested in doing the work that we do, you can reach out to me or any of my students anytime. We're always looking for new people to join us.
Yeah, I would love to join your lab. Do you have people of like varied backgrounds, like from the animal scientist side and also from the technology side?
Currently, I would say that most of them are from the tech side, but I do work with a lot of my collaborators who are from the animal ag side and their students. So this past year, we have funded together, I think, 4 undergraduate students who are from the animal ag side as well, um, for this work. So because we are not authorized to actually interact with the animals ourselves, it takes a certain level of expertise. So the animal scientists actually help us out with that a lot. And shout out to them because without them, we wouldn't be able to do any of this, right? So their expertise is taken into account at every step of the design process and also the experiments that we conduct.
Okay. And then do you do research in any other countries or just the US?
I think for now it has been mostly in the US, but I am always open to building more collaborations outside. I have spoken to a bunch of people who are in different areas in agriculture in various countries like Australia, Brazil, and India, of course. And I'm hopeful those will lead to some good implementations of this technology.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you use any other technologies like computer vision or anything to monitor animals remotely?
Yes. So as roboticists, we usually work with the traditional set of computer vision. So in my lab, we are taking this a step forward, where we're going beyond what is the regular RGBD, which is camera in depth, to event cameras. So event cameras are optical flow in which that they are not taking a sample at a predetermined sampling rate, but they are looking for motion. So when they see change, that's when they take a sample. And because of this, they can be very sparse or very dense. So they're very good for our interaction studies. We're looking at very minute level nuances in change, and the overall environment stays static, right? So you're only processing that particular nuance or particular change and not the extra work of processing the rest of the frame. So that reduces computation loads and resources that you need for storage and processing significantly. Apart from event cameras, we also work with millimeter waves. So they are kind of like an RF wave that is high frequency. And it can be used for occlusion, near occlusion, where you cannot see the object as well as clearly. And alongside that, we also use LiDARs as always for proximity. So these are the set of sensors that we always incorporate in most of our robots.
Okay. So do these robots like tell you when the animal is sick? And then would you give alerts to the owner of the animals?
So yes, that's what the cyber physical system side of it is. There
Okay.
is, I would say, offloading of compute. So what do I mean by that? At the edge, we are processing some data so that you don't have to transmit all raw data to the cloud, which saves a lot of communication costs. And at the edge, we are deciding if you have detected an anomaly, right? So whether there is a temperature spike, a spike in pH, or any abnormal behavior. And that then gets transmitted to the cloud, where other algorithms from our collaborators can tell you whether it's a health event or if there is a need for urgent care for this animal. Part of my PhD work was also on using these kind of networks to basically localize where the animal might be on the farm, because the standard size of a US farm is around anywhere from 1,000 to 10,000 heads of cattle. So localizing there can be a challenge. And this kind of technology can let you pinpoint where your animal is and who actually needs care.
Okay. Can you give some examples of these edge devices you're using?
So one is the collar that we made. Other is a cannula mounted methane sensor that we built. So that also samples temperature and pH. And we can also integrate other off-the-shelf devices like a pedometer that most of the animals have
Okay.
into this network.
Hmm. Do you also use anything like drones to capture images from above?
You could. I haven't done that so far because the goal of this work has been to get the level of care or the granularity of care back to the individual and not a herd.
Okay.
So we want to return to, through technology, the olden ways where people used to have a bunch of cows in their house, and they would know the names and what each individual animal needed. So that kind of individual customized care has been shown that can boost productivity by up to 20%, right? Which is a huge number for animal ag, and also improve their welfare. So through technology, that's our goal. So that's why you see more individual-centric devices in my research.
Okay, so you focus more on the individual cattle's well-being. Okay, and then what kinds of challenges do you face in doing your projects?
Um, I think there are a lot of challenges in animal agriculture because it's one area that has been, I guess, that has the least amount of technological integration in a way, I would say. So, because if you think about it, like crop agriculture has now automated tractors, right? They have had drones for a while now, and all farms now have some form of technology already available. On the animal ag side, that is not the case. It's harder, right? Crops grow. You can ignore a crop for a couple of weeks; it will be fine. But you cannot ignore an animal, right?
Yeah.
The health can change in a matter of hours, especially if it's a health event like pregnancy or giving birth. So it's a very fast time scale where you care about the individual. Right? You don't really necessarily care about an individual plant in a field, but you care about an individual cow that's on your farm. Um, so all of these dynamics make it much harder for technology to have an impact and to work as robustly as it needs to be, right? Because there's a lot of variation from just group dynamics, right? They have friends, they have societies among themselves, animals, and that also impacts their individual health. So now what you're seeing mostly in form of technology in this area has been about, I would say, around milk or productivity markers. So automated milkers and automated milk quality sensors and so on. But there has not been, I would say, concrete robotics integration. It's slowly starting, but it hasn't reached that space. So just to get data sets or basic fundamentals in place, it has to be done from scratch. And that has been a challenge, which I enjoy because it's like carving out a new niche for robotics. From the practical side, I would say it's also harder to have uh, people who want to take this on, right, in terms of students, because um, it's not a very comfortable environment, is what I would say, right? And it takes a certain level of ruggedness to actually work in this area. Um, so I think those have been the major challenges so far.
Okay. And then what advice would you have for people like me who would want to go into a similar field?
I think that robotics can be something or can be anything that you make of it, right? Because it's a very broad area where some people are working at the molecular level, and then there are some people who are working at the satellite level, right? So it's as broad as that. Um, so, but we need robotics. There are a lot of things that can be done much better and much safely with robots than exposing humans to it. Um, and certain areas like animal agriculture are bridging this gap of labor availability where you're not replacing human beings, you're augmenting them, you're giving them like a reliable pathway of doing their work. So to somebody like you, I would say that keep a broader um, or look more broadly, explore, right? If you have an access to like a university like Purdue, where there are a lot of research labs, I recommend reaching out to professors or research labs, and especially during summer, if possible, to get an idea of where research is.
Yeah.
What are the problems people think are worth solving, and how are they solving it? Um, Try to explore as much as you can so that you can find what is truly your interest, right? A lot of problems that you see in the robotic space need a lot of dedicated effort because a robot needs a lot of things, right? So it needs mechanical structure, it needs electronics, it needs software, and it also needs now programming and AI. So you can make it through a lot of training in all these areas. There's no one pathway to it. So that's what I would recommend. Find, explore, and then see what actually is inspiring or motivational to you if you want to get into this field.
Okay. And then if someone wants to join your lab specifically, what skills should they have?
I think first of all, they should have interest in this area because I understand this is not everybody's cup of tea, right? It's a very challenging domain in certain regards because you also want the technology to catch up to the demands of this area. You have to be flexible enough that you can work in a computer lab, which is my lab at Purdue, but also go on the field and actually deploy these things. But other than that, if you're willing to learn and you want to learn, you're willing to put in the effort, um, you can just email me or any of my students. We are always looking for undergrads and high schoolers during summertime to join us.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. It was so much fun talking to you and learning about all your work.
Likewise, I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, so that's all the podcast questions I have for you. But I also wanted to ask you, like, how do you like Purdue?
At Purdue School, it's a big public school, which means that you can see people from, I would say, like very different departments working together, right? So one of my project is with Dr. Catherine Hill in entomology, and she works on insects, which is primarily ticks. I know of ticks. I have never seen a tick before, before working with her. So it was interesting, and it was and this is what I like about Purdue, that I get to meet such interesting people who are working on such broad problems, and seeing and just learning from them, not even uh, asking for collaboration, but mostly just learning how well or how they approach their work, and what are the problems really in the world.
Yeah, that's exciting.